Today we welcome Robert Waggoner to the channel. Robert is the author of the acclaimed book, Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self, and he's the co-author of Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple. He's a past president of the International Association for the Study of Dreams, a co-editor of the online magazine Lucid Dreaming Experience, and a founder of the nonprofit Lucid Dreaming Foundation. He's here today to share his story of how he got started lucid dreaming, introduce us to some techniques for lucid dreaming, and help us understand how to explore our subconscious with lucid dreaming. We also talk about quite a bit more. And with that, I am honored to introduce Robert as today's Paradigm Sherpa.
So I'm Robert Waggoner. I'm the author of two books, Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self, and also Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple, which I co-authored with Caroline McCready. When I was young, I just had an incredibly amazing dream life. And so I really followed my dreams. I noticed on occasion I'd have precognitive dreams, and that really surprised me as a young person, couldn't quite figure that out. And then I noticed on occasion I would become aware within a dream that I was dreaming. I literally knew, hey, this is a dream. And probably the first time it happened, I was like 10 years old. I'd fallen asleep that night. And then I found myself in the public library. And I'm looking at the books, looking for a good book like I would on any boring Sunday or whatever. And all of a sudden, I see a baby Tyrannosaurus Rex walking through the book stacks. And even though I was 10 or 11, I thought, how can this be? Dinosaurs are extinct. And then at that moment, I realized, oh, this must be a dream. I'm dreaming this. And then I told myself, well, if this is a dream, I could confirm that by waking up. So I told myself to wake up, and I woke up in bed. And so that was my very first spontaneous lucid dream that happened when I was quite young. It took me a while, but later when I was a junior in high school, I was reading a book by Carlos Castaneda called Journey to ISSN. And in this book, his shamanic teacher gives him an approach to becoming aware within the dreams. There really wasn't a technique, it was just kind of the idea. And so I used that idea, and a few days later had my first consciously induced lucid dream.
Well, thanks for explaining to people how the journey started. I mean, for me, just to kind of share back, the first thing that really made me, I was much later in life. I was very close with my mom's mom. She passed away and then started showing up in my dreams. And, eventually I was like, oh, well, grandma's not actually here anymore. And that was my trigger, right? I didn't try to do it. But as soon as I got hip to being in dreams, I wanted, the first thing I tried to do is fly, which I think you mentioned in the book's pretty natural for people to do. But I wanted to learn how to actually purposefully do this because it was a very rich and rewarding experience. And now what you mentioned just now, what you were introduced to in the Castaneda book, I believe you talked about looking at your hands, right? Is that the...
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you explain why that's useful for people, or a good reality check, right? That's how the term you use?
Well, so in the book, his shamanic teacher, Don Juan, tells him that he should try to find his hands in the dream state and realize he's dreaming. But there really wasn't a technique. And so I thought, could you do that? Could you realize within a dream that you were dreaming by seeing your hands? And so what I did, I knew about the power of suggestion. So every night before I'd go to sleep, I'd just put the palm of my hands in front of my face, and for about 5 minutes, I would quietly tell myself, tonight my dreams will see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight my dreams will see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight my dreams will see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Anyway, I'd fall asleep. When I'd wake up in the middle of the night, I'd wonder, oh, did I see my hands in a dream? Nope, that's what I want to do. On the third night, at that time I'm in high school, I'm walking through B Hall in my high school, and suddenly, just like they're spring-loaded, boom, my hands popped right in front of my face, and I said, oh my God, my hands. And it was so wild to realize those guys over there who are dressed like football player guys, they're just dream characters. And I reached over and touched this wall because I wanted to feel what a dream wall would feel like, knowing it was a dream. And darned if it wasn't cool and nubby, just like a, kind of concrete wall should be. And then I walked out of the hall to the administrative building. And I'm standing outside the administrative building, just amazed at the detail. I'm thinking, my mind is creating all this incredible detail. And I began to notice that even the brickwork in the administrative building was detailed. And all of a sudden, something happened. And the lucid dream got shaky. And I remember in the book, Journey to ISSN, the shamanic teacher said, don't focus on anything exclusively. Always turn your head away after 3 seconds because it'll cause the dream to collapse. But if the dream is going to collapse, then look back at your hands to renew the power of dreaming. So that's what I did. I looked back at my hands to renew the power of dreaming. And now, if you can imagine this, I became a little dot of light that was floating through the palm prints of my hands as if they were the Grand Canyon. And so now I'm having this totally new perspective, and I'm like, what? This is incredible. And I'm floating through the palm prints. I know I'm in my palm prints. And then boom, I bounce back to original size. And then I decide, oh, I want to go flying. And I was so excited. I probably flew about 4 or 5 feet before I got so excited I woke up.
And I'm glad. Well, so there's a few things I want to unpack in there, and I think some of it's related to the lessons you point out early on in the book. Um, First being that your senses, your classic five senses, like you can't really trust them. That they're not going to help you realize you're in the dream or the waking state, right? Because they work effectively well in both.
You know, it's interesting. The senses basically work in accordance with your expectation. So if I expect that wall is going to seem, tough and concrete, it feels tough and concrete. But if I expect that I can poke my fingers through it, darned if I can't poke my fingers through it like it's, silly putty or something. So it's really interesting. You're right. All of a sudden, you realize the senses aren't necessarily your friend. They're not your enemy, but they're an adaptable mechanism. And so that's what you learn.
So it really comes down to the mind, right? Like how you prep and use your mind in that to stay in that state or to enter that state, right?
Right. How you relate to it and react to it, it's basically follows the mind. And so that's why as you go deeper and deeper into lucid dreaming, you oftentimes have to expand your belief system, expand your mindset, expand your thinking in order to keep pursuing. And also, even more importantly, you have to let go of fears and concerns and some of those things that normally people never even imagined would be part of the lucid dream journey.
Well, I certainly want to get back to that point, the fears, in a minute, because when I talk about like dream characters in particular, I think that for me personally, I have some dreams characters that scare the crap out of me until I kind of ground myself within the dream and then reformulate my relationship with them. But um, one thing that I wanted to circle back on, I think is important for people, especially as they're like starting this journey that you really highlighted for me, was the idea of it's exciting when you first like realize you're in a dream and that excitement can snap you out of the whole experience, right?
Right. Well, when I give workshops and talks, that's one of the things I always tell to people. When you become lucidly aware, modulate your emotions. Don't get too excited one way or the other, because oftentimes if you get way too excited, then you'll pop back into the waking world. And so oftentimes when I become lucid, I'll tell myself to calm down or stay calm. And it's almost like any vocalized instruction that you give yourself is immediately acted upon. And so just telling yourself to calm down normally is enough to do it.
So it's quick responses to what the mind's telling you, right?
Exactly.
Interesting. Well, maybe this is a good segue then. I still am very excited to talk about fear and dream characters, but I would love to get to that towards the end a little. But maybe you could help. You wrote a chapter that really stood out to me, and it's called "Does the Sailor Control the Sea?" And I think that, I'd love if you could just kind of explain what the theme is behind that and why that was such an important thing to include in the book.
Right. So, a lot of times people will define lucid dreaming as a lucid dream is a dream in which you realize you're dreaming and then you control everything. And that to me is an errant viewpoint. It's not the viewpoint you want to have. And the reason I say that is as you go deeper into lucid dreaming, you suddenly start to realize, oh, there's a lot of stuff here I don't control. Like, for example, if I became lucidly aware and flew through this wall and popped out on the other side, and now I see a castle and a white horse, who created that? I didn't create it. I just flew through the bloody wall. So that's what I'm trying to get to is that when you're having a lucid dream, you don't control everything. You do influence yourself and manipulate the environment, and you kind of control your direction and your focus. Okay, but whoever put the castle and the white horse on the other side of this wall is your unconscious mind, your subconscious mind, or some other factor. And so that's why I say the sailor doesn't control the sea. So a sailor has to deal with the wind, the waves, the current, their ability, the ship's ability, and all that in order to get to the port. And 99% of the time they'll get there. And that's how it is with the lucid dreamer. The lucid dreamer has to work through their own belief system, their own mindset, things that are happening, unexpected things that happen. Like in that first example, I look back at the palm of my hands to renew the power of dreaming, and what happens to me? I become a little ball of light floating around the palm print. I didn't plan on that; it just happened. So that's why it's so important to realize that the sailor doesn't control the sea. Now, further on in the journey, you really have to understand this because when you get into the deeper waters of lucid dreaming, you're really dealing with some really deep stuff. And if you think that if you still believe that you control everything, then why did that happen? Why did that happen? Why did that happen? It's kind of terrifying because you realize, wait a second. So my definition of lucid dream is a lucid dream means more aware relating to the unconscious. And so that's what I want people to understand. There's a dance going on here. There's a relationship going on here. You influence, but you don't control.
So I'm glad that we're moving towards the depths of the sea now and the unconscious, right? Carl Jung was famous for popularizing the unconscious, or at least, and maybe for me, maybe I'm projecting that, but there's this whole other aspect of ourselves that we're not aware of that really kind of runs the show, but then we kind of think our egoic sense of self is in charge, but often we don't understand that there's a lot going on in the subconscious that drives our everyday actions in waking life, right? Not
Right.
just in dreamland.
Yeah, so for a lot of us who grew up with kind of a traditional psychological viewpoint, the unconscious was always kind of looked down upon. It's kind of like the repository of all the memories and feelings and hurts and disappointments and whatever tendencies or instincts that you don't even want to examine.
Yeah.
It's all down there in the unconscious. And so the unconscious from that viewpoint gets kind of a negative view. But when you start to have more and more lucid dreams, and you start to see how much joy and happiness there is in lucid dreaming, and how many incredible adventures you have, you start to go, wait a second, this unconscious, it's not all roses, but it's not all scary figures and all that kind of stuff. And so you get a better view of what the unconscious is all about. But it was probably 10 years into lucid dreaming when I realized that there was something behind the unconscious of dreaming, and that's when I realized that this unconscious of dreaming was actually very conscious, and so it gave me a whole new perspective on lucid dreaming.
Yeah, it's definitely opened me up to the idea that maybe the non-dual nature of the unconscious, where it's not black and white, good or good or bad. Like it is, I think, for lack of a better way to define it. It just is, and there's a lot of worthwhile things to explore once you're down there.
Right? It's kind of the blue ocean of the mind. It's kind of this unexplored area because part of the reason is there's never been a tool to explore it. And that's why I love lucid dreaming is that when you're consciously aware within the dream, you can begin to explore the nature of the dream cell, the dream state, also the nature of the dream self, also the nature of the unconscious mind. You can do experiments, you can explore. And with that, you finally have a chance to kind of get into it. But for so long, science has had no really brilliant way to explore it until lucid dreaming came along.
Well, and speaking of science, I believe if memory serves me correct in the book, you talk about, and I think this was long ago, maybe the 70s, if I remember. Someone did an experiment where they, once they entered the dream state to communicate back there in the lucid dream state, didn't they like purposely move their eyes side to side 8 times or something like that?
That's right. So, this all started out in the mid 70s. There was a researcher, graduate student in England, Keith Hearn, and he met a gentleman, Alan Worsley, who said he could lucid dream quite frequently. And Keith Hearn thought, well, how could you prove that scientifically? You know, the person is having a dream, but how could you prove that they were consciously aware? And then suddenly he had this brilliant idea. So he brought Alan Worsley into the sleep lab. He put these rapid eye movement polygraph pads on his eyes and put some other clips on his body to show that he remained in the sleep state. And he said, okay, I want you to fall asleep, but when you become lucidly aware, when you realize within a dream you're dreaming, move your eyes left to right 8 times. And that'll show up on the REM polygraph pad readout, and that'll prove that lucid dreaming exists, that you can consciously exert some influence within the dream state. And so I think it was April of 1975, Alan Worsley became lucidly aware, signaled with his eyes he was lucidly aware. There were other signals on his body showing that he remained in the dream state. And that was the first scientific evidence for lucid dreaming. And it's a beautiful story because even though that ushers in the modern science of lucid dreaming, there's also a whole other side to lucid dreaming, wherein shamanic and indigenous cultures in Buddhism and Sufism and Taoism and other wisdom traditions, they've been using lucid dreaming for thousands of years. So it was kind of beautiful that this ancient spiritual technique finally got some scientific support and backing for being valid.
Yeah, it's amazing what people would, I think, foolishly, or not foolishly, I mean, we've grown up in the worldview that science and spirituality are mutually exclusive, but I do think that, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that that's not the case. And especially when you look at things like quantum mechanics or maybe the implication of quantum theory, um, it has a lot of resonance between what you suggested, some of those cultures that have been trying to tell us for a long time that there's more to just the material world in a sense.
Right. So again, lucid dreaming opens up the unconscious for exploration and not only conducting scientific experiments, but you can do your own personal experiments as well. And for me, that opened up some whole new vistas that I didn't even understand when I first started lucid dreaming back in 1975.
Yeah, well, maybe we can dive into that a little bit because I think one of the things I love about lucid dreaming is it's experiential, right? Like I love learning, reading books, papers, whatever, YouTube videos, podcasts, but it's kind of like a secondhand thing, right? Whereas this, you are, and unlike therapy too, when you're going to meet with your therapist or psychologist, like this is really all on you in a way, and you're in the driver's seat of the exploration. Yeah, maybe can you introduce us to some concepts of like interacting with dream characters or the symbology of the dreamscape. Could you expand on that for us?
Yeah, so I I think one thing I learned early on when it came to interacting with dream figures is that dream figures vary. All dream figures are not created equal. And because in a lucid dream, you can walk up to random dream figures and ask them a question. And some dream figures just seemed completely hollow and empty. They just had no reply. And sometimes you might get something gibberish, but sometimes, as I noted in my first book, sometimes you'd ask a question like, "Do you know you're a dream figure and I'm dreaming you?" And then the dream figure would reply, "How do you know I'm not dreaming you?" And so when you have those moments happen, then you realize, whoa, what just happened here? There's something really strange. I remember one time I was flying around a crowd of dream figures, and then I decided, just for whatever fun reason popped into my head, that I was going to knock off the hats of everyone wearing a hat in the crowd. And so I'd fly down and knock off a few hats and fly down again and knock off a few hats. And then the third time coming around, all of a sudden, a dream figure reached up and grabbed me in mid-flight. And I thought, what is going on here? So what you begin to realize very early on is dream figures vary. And almost around the world, you'll hear lucid dreamers report that dream figures hate it when you tell them that they're a dream figure. They look so disgusted, like, oh, you're the biggest idiot in the world, don't say that. So what that's taught me how to do, and what I encourage people to do, is when you interact with a dream figure, the first thing you should do is say, who are you? Or what do you represent? Because a lot of times when you ask them, who are you? Then you'll realize, oh my gosh, they actually have some awareness and they're playing a role within the lucid dream. So it is really a fascinating aspect, just figuring out who dream figures are.
Yeah, it is fascinating, and I've tried this many times, and I've gotten a variety of responses as you suggest, and um, maybe this is a good segue into the kind of the conversation about fears because I've had reoccurring dreams, and then sometimes because it's reoccurring, I'm like, oh, I know this one. I remember, and then I remember your book, and I'm like, okay. Rather than running away from this scary dream figure, I stop and I say, hey, what do you represent? And then not I don't always get maybe an answer, but sometimes just stopping and turning and asking, the fear goes away, the person stops chasing me, they morph into something else that's generally more pleasant for me to look at, versus like a monster like creature or something like that. Then I've also gotten like just straight up, hey, you've been putting this off in your life and you've been avoiding it, and I'm like screaming to try and tell you to take care of this in your conscious life and change, XYZ behavior. And so,
Wow. Wow.
and it's been tremendously helpful for me. So yeah, I think Deb, I appreciate you guiding people on how to engage dream characters because yeah, you know, uh, almost like throwing it in a dream character's face, like, oh, you're in my dream world. That's like not it's not the way you start a relationship, right? It's not as the kindest way to interact, I guess.
What's interesting about it is how profound it can be with some people. So I co-edit this magazine called the Lucid Dreaming Experience. It's a quarterly that anyone can get for free at luciddreamingmagazine.com. But
Awesome.
anyway, one time I was in Seattle giving a workshop, and this guy came up to me and says, I want you to know that your second book totally changed my life. And then his wife came up and said, that's right. Your second book totally changed his life. And so now I had to hear the story. And basically what he said he grew up in kind of a dysfunctional family. And his dreams were just full of violence and angry dream figures and battles and everything. And so as a little kid, he learned how to become lucid, to deal with all the kind of nightmarish scenarios.
Mhm.
But what he would do is just the same thing every time. He'd either try to fight him and beat him, the dream figures, or he'd run away. So he was just in fight or flight,
Yeah.
just that kind of reactive thing. But then he said he started reading my book, and I suggested that when you meet an angry or hostile dream figure, send it what it lacks. So send it love or compassion or understanding. And you'll watch that as your mind changes, the dream figure changes. It'll get smaller, it'll turn into a little boy who just wants a hug. All this kind of stuff will happen. And so he began to experiment in his own lucid dreams, and he discovered that, oh, this is a million times better than fighting the dream figures. I'll just smother them with love, and then that they just want a hug. They just totally. And he said, in all of his lucid dreams from then on, he began to love and send compassion to all of his dream figures. And he said within months, his entire life had changed. He said his dysfunctional family suddenly was no longer dysfunctional. And now they were all interested in spirituality. And he'd go to work, and his coworkers, instead of kind of making fun of him and not treating him with respect, all of a sudden they were interested in his ideas and would laugh at his jokes and stuff. And he said it utterly, completely, by coming to peace with the inner landscape, it totally transformed the outer landscape without him having to do anything. And so that's why I think lucid dreaming just has so much potential to kind of help us see the nature of our inner reality so that we can transform the nature of our outer reality.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And to be honest, it's done that for me in a number of ways, and it's become a part of my life. I don't, I've gone through ebbs and flows of like being really focused on it, and then just kind of having normal dreams, and then and writing those down. I actually find that the dream journal is really helpful for me to when I'm ready to re-engage in lucid dreaming, more on the reality checks, because like if I stop doing reality checks, then it's hard for me to maintain consistency and getting back into the lucid dream state. I always want to be in the lucid dream state. It's much more rich than just being along for the ride in a lot of ways. But yeah, I definitely think that it's been very healing for me, and I see changes, at least in myself, for sure, in my external life as I engage with those dream characters.
Right.
I'm curious your opinions on, outside of like just you know characters or people. Are there other symbols or things in dreams that we might want to consider that aren't just a person?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Dreams oftentimes come in a symbolic language, and that's one thing that I really want to just mention briefly is that I want people to honor dreaming. I'm not creating some sort of system where lucid dreams are the thing and everything else is just a bunch of mush. Some of my most powerful dreams and my most incredible dreams have just been what people would call regular dreaming. It's really given me incredible insights, shown me things that I never would have understood. I wanted to also mention that I remember once there was this spiritual conference that I'd go to, and then there was the dream conference that I'd go to every year. And one of my friends from the spiritual conference, who had also started coming to the dream conference, he goes, "Have you noticed how the people are different in each of these conferences?" And I go, what do you mean? He says, in the spiritual conference, every year they come and they have the same issues that they're dealing with, and the same, mountain they're trying to climb. But you go over to the dream conference and those people are changing, they're growing, they're exploring, they're taking care of stuff, and they're moving on. And that was really a powerful moment for me, because I think when we start to pay attention to our dreams, it gives us insight into things that we need to focus on, issues that we need to deal with. And when you have a spiritual philosophy, a lot of times, you're just, your ego wants to do X, Y, Z, and so, that's where your ego is.
It could
So,
be a trap, right? Like the spiritual ego is just another kind of trap in a sense.
exactly. And so you almost need outside advice from the dream world to get you on the proper path. Here are your issues. Deal with your issues. Don't try to achieve something that some monk did 500 years ago, on some mountaintop somewhere. That's not your issue. Your ego wants to go there, but that's not your issue. Deal with these limiting things, and as you break through those, new energy will emerge, and you'll grow as a human being. So again, just paying attention to your dreams is great, and paying attention to your lucid dreams is great. The great thing about lucid dreams, though, is it gives you an option to explore dream symbolism.
Mhm.
And so in a lucid dream, sometimes when I've met very lucid dream figures, I've asked them to interpret the dream that we're all in. What does that represent? Oh, and then they'll tell me. And what does that represent? Oh, and then they tell me. And so it's really fascinating sometimes to begin to learn about dream symbolism from within in the lucid dream, from knowledgeable dream figures, or on occasion from just asking a dream figure, hey, what do you yourself represent? And sometimes they'll tell you, what they're all about. So it gives you a new vantage point to explore things instead of having just to open up some dream dictionary and try to figure it out.
Sure, sure. Now, speaking of asking a dream figure, do you have like any dream figures that are reoccurring, and reoccurring in the sense that like they embody the same sort of like they're always kind of the same person in your dream, like or like for me when I see my grandma in my dreams, like she's mostly behaving like my grandma. I remembered her, but then, not always too. So it's not like I can trust that that's actually like, her in a
Right.
sense.
Yeah. So for me, it's a bit interesting. Recurring dream figures would probably, for me, be people who have passed on, who are deceased. And so oftentimes I'll become lucidly aware when I see them because I'll think, wait a second, they passed away 10 years ago. This has to be a dream. But I remember, for example, my grandmother. So by the time I was born, I don't know, my grandmother was probably 55, 60 or something. And by the time I began to know her as a person, she was in her 70s and 80s and 90s. So I knew her as that woman. But when I see her in a dream, she looks like she's about 30 years old. I didn't know her as a 30-year-old woman. And here's the way she specializes herself so that I get it. She has little pixie elves flying around her head because she was Scottish. She was mostly Scottish. And so I'm in a dream and I see these pixies flying around and I go, oh gosh, that's Grandma Jenny. This is a dream. And it's so hilarious to meet her in that particular state. Um, it's interesting, this whole issue of deceased dream figures though, because sometimes a deceased dream figure can represent just a reflection of your grief and your memory and your longing or whatever.
Mhm.
But in a lucid dream, you can actually challenge this by asking them a question. Like, so grandma, what do you have to tell me? And sometimes they'll surprise you when they tell you something that's going to happen in the future. And then you have to wait to see if that occurs. But in my experience, they've often been totally correct. And so it brings up this whole issue of the after death state and the complexity of dream figures.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me there's an absolute connection between the dream state and, I guess what we think about in terms of, afterlife, with those figures popping up. And I've had maybe a handful of precognitive dreams myself. It's not a super common occurrence for me, but enough that it's happened and it's been really profound. To the point where I'm like, well, this isn't just deja vu. Like I actually dreamed this, and then the timing's interesting though. It's not like, oh, I dreamed this last night, so the next day this happened. Sometimes it's like I dreamt this, and then like a couple months will go by, and then it
Right.
happened, and then it all hits, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is in was in a dream, and I can even go back to my dream journal as a sort of secondary validation for me that like, hey, this actually really happened.
Right. Probably one of the most surprising ones that happened to me here in the last couple of years. So it was January 1st of 2023, 2022, sorry, 2022. And I, I'm walking through this kind of conference area. There's people around, and all of a sudden I see my mother-in-law, Nona, but she's deceased. And immediately I become lucid, and I'm kind of chuckling to myself, boy, she's been dead for 10 years now, and she finally comes to see me. And so here comes Nona walking up to me, and she looks like she's about 40 years old, and she's wearing kind of a dress that it looks like she herself had sewn, and she was kind of into sewing when she was alive. So anyway, she comes up to me, and one thing I always encourage people in my workshops to do is ask an open-ended question. So don't tell a dream figure what they're all about. Ask an open-ended question. So I greet Nona and I say, "So Nona, what do you have to tell me?" And she replies, "I want you to know that September is a very important month." And I think to myself, and I joke with her, I said, "Well, Nona, if you believe September is important, I'm sure it's important." And she looks at me and she goes, "No, I want you to understand that September will be a very important month." And so that was her message. So I decided to wake up and write it down before I forgot. And when I woke up, I told my wife, I said, "I think your mom has come to tell me that my mom is going to pass away in September." And so in physical reality, the last weekend of August, my wife and I go to visit my mother who lived 8 hours away and had a very nice visit and all. And then the next weekend, the first weekend of September, she passed away. So, so that's why I think it's always important to ask a question, what do you have to tell me? Because a lot of times people, they'll become lucidly aware when they see their deceased loved one, and they'll just, fall into tears. "Oh, I miss you so much," or "I love you," or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm on the other side. I'm like, let's get something out of this encounter. And, they know that I love them and care about them and all that kind of stuff. I don't have to express it. But let's see what we got here. Because it might just be a random dream figure. It might just be a projection of my missing them or whatever. But if you ask an open-ended question, what do you have to say? Then you give them a chance to provide something.
I mean, that's amazing, and I'm certainly guilty of being that person that's like, "Oh, I miss you so much." Like, "Oh, it's just so great to see you." And honestly, that's almost part of like my waking up process. Like I get it out of my system and then I can move past it. And it's probably just out of my lack of skill of self-awareness in the dreams, but yeah, to be able to give them the opportunity to share some wisdoms seems like a super meaningful thing that we should all at least consider and be open to.
Right. I remember once interacting with a guy who told me what happened in his life. So his parents got divorced when he was a little kid, and then he's in high school, and suddenly his mom gets cancer, and within a year she passes away. And so he said he graduated from high school, but he was just an angry person. He didn't have any relationship with his father. Now his mom was dead. And so he ended up becoming a bouncer in a bar because he could beat up people at the end of the evening who weren't leaving quickly enough. And so he said it went on like that, for a number of months. And then finally, one night in a dream, his mom appears, and he becomes lucidly aware because, hey, his mom's dead, but she's standing right there. And she tells him, "I want you to know that I left a bunch of boxes for you with our old friends, June and Sandy. And so you have to go and get those boxes." And so the guy wakes up with this information from the lucid dream. He said he called up this old couple, and they said, "We've been looking for you for months. We couldn't find you. Your mom left all these boxes for you." And he was blown away that first that little detail was correct. And then he went
Yeah.
there and got all the boxes, and they were all the childhood memories and all the, good times and happy times. But what he said was that one simple lucid dream made him realize that there's something more to life than just this.
Yeah.
There's something deeper, there's something more going on here. And so he said he got his head together. He started a software coding associate's degree at the community college. He started up a company, made a bunch of money, and he's gone on to live his life. But this is how powerful lucid dreaming can be. Just sometimes one lucid dream or just getting some insight that's there's no way you could know it, and getting that in a lucid dream. Sometimes that's all it takes in order to change the direction of someone's life.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all that one profound experience like that, especially if it's, something that you take into the waking life and then there's a correspondence between those things. I mean, I don't know how that couldn't have a profound impact on people.
Right.
Um, One thing that actually, speaking of, these people in our dreams, in the book, you mentioned sometimes we meet people who are alive and maybe they're actually like we're sharing a dream. There's a potential that, you know, I might have the same dream as my wife or a friend, and we're both in our a shared dream space. Can you talk about that a little bit? I found that fascinating.
Yeah, there's this idea of shared dreaming, and the beautiful thing about it. Sometimes you hear just examples of it. Like a friend told me how her friends they were pregnant with their first child, and on the same night they both learned the name the child wanted to be called, and they both woke up and said, "Boy, I had this weird dream. Our little child that's going to be born in a few months wants to be called, this." And the other one goes, "Yeah, I had the same dream. He wants to exactly that's what he wants to be called." So sometimes you have those kind of examples of shared dream. But the beautiful thing about lucid dreaming is oftentimes the person is lucidly aware, and then because of their lucid awareness, they can focus on things that the other person might not be aware of, who seems to be in their lucid dream. I'll give you one funny example that happened to me. So I live in the Midwest, and I had a friend, Maureen, everyone called her Mo, who lived in the Bay Area. And so one night I become lucidly aware. And I'm in this restaurant and I'm looking at the salt shakers and I can see the individual crystals of salt. And I think a Hollywood set designer could not do better than this lucid dream. I mean, this is incredible how real it is. Suddenly through the door walks Mo. And so I run over to Mo and I say, "Mo, do you understand this is a dream? We're dreaming this." And here's the funny thing. Mo had rapid eye movement. I could see her eyes moving, just bouncing all over the place. And so I realized that she was still in her own dream realm. And
Yeah.
so I thought, how can I get her to wake up and realize this is a dream? So I grabbed her around the waist and I started to float up because in a lucid dream you can fly and float. And so we floated about 10 feet up and I said, "Mo, do you see this? We're floating. This is a dream." But still her eyes were going boom, 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 boom. And I realized I still haven't woken her up to this dream state. So then I was running out of options. And so I put my fingers in a peace sign and I shoved it in her face. And I said, "Mo, do you see this peace sign? You can use it as a symbol to help you become lucidly aware anytime you want." So I woke up, wrote down the lucid dream. I thought my friend Mo would give me a call or email. She didn't. So I figured out maybe that was just my own dream, but who knows? About 6 months later, or 3 months later, I'm out in California on a business trip. I realize I have some free time. I call up Mo and I said, "Hey, Mo, you want to get together for lunch?" She goes, "Sure, sure. Meet me at this restaurant in Burlingame." So I'm standing outside the restaurant, and here comes Mo walking up the sidewalk. And right as she comes up to me, again, this is in waking reality, right as she comes up to me, she puts her fingers in a peace sign and shoves it in my face. And I said, "Mo, why are you doing that?" And she says, "I don't know. I just felt like it." so,
Wow.
so, so that's kind of one of those moments where you feel like information got transferred over to the other person, even though they weren't lucidly aware. Uh, but in my chapter in my first book, Lucid Dreaming Gateway to the Inner Self, I have an entire chapter on mutual lucid dreams. And in some of them, both parties were lucid. And then when they woke, you would see the corresponding recollection. but there might be details like one person says, "Oh, we're in the Sonoran Desert," and the other person goes, "Oh, we're outside. We're in Death Valley."
Yeah.
And so, there might be some little disagreements there. Or that was a river. No, it was a lake. How do you know it was a lake? Because I walked around it after you left. Those kind of things. But I have a good friend, Ed Kellogg, who's really an expert at this. And one morning he called me up and he said, "Do you remember your dreams from last night?" And I said, "Sure, sure. Let me grab my dream journal." I started reading them off, and he goes, "Okay, that one with you at the table. Was the woman sitting across from you wearing a blue dress and had a white flower, on her lapel?" And I go, "Yeah, yeah, she did. And yes, she did have glasses and all that." And so the guy sitting to your right, do you remember him? I go, "Oh, yeah." And then Ed would describe him. And I go, "Ed, how do you know that? How do you know that?" And he goes, "Just one more question. Was there anyone sitting to your left?" And I said, "Gosh, I know there was someone sitting to my left. I know it was a guy, but I just can't remember." And Ed goes, "Oh, that's because that was me, and I was lucidly aware, observing the entire experience." And he nailed everything in the dream experience there. So when you have those moments, you begin to realize that not all dreams, but there's a certain subset of dreams where we mesh or we meet and begin to engage the dream space. But it really helps if you're lucidly aware, because then you can actually take it a little bit further.
Yeah, yeah. It really opens up all kinds of questions about consciousness and, all things being connected. And, I guess back to my earlier comment about like, some of the implications of quantum theory. Like, I feel like there's so much overlap there. One thing that I guess that I'm curious about, this conversation brought to mind, is when I think of meeting people in the non-physical. There's also the concept of like an out of body experience as well. And I think you write about that a little bit in the books. Could you maybe help us differentiate a little bit between that?
Yeah, I tell people a lucid dream compared to an out of body is like a house cat compared to a mountain lion. They're both in the feline family, but they are two different animals altogether. So again, a lucid dream is any dream in which you realize within the dream you're dreaming. You see something strange and go, "Oh, wait a second, this is a dream. I'm dreaming this." But an out of body might occur when you have like a car crash, and you're laying outside of the car, and now you find yourself floating 20 feet above it, and you're watching the ambulance come, trying to revive your lifeless body. So
Yeah.
that's an out of body. There's no realizing within a dream you're dreaming. So they're obviously two different things. Also, though, sometimes people, when they're falling asleep, they might start to feel this humming or buzzing around their body, and then they might experience being 6 feet above, their body, looking at the bedroom in the middle of the night.
Mhm.
Again, they did not realize within a dream that they were dreaming. They just started to have these weird sensations of humming and buzzing, and now they feel themselves, floating above their body. So again, that that differentiates itself from a lucid dream. So there are definitely two distinct experiences, and I tried to make that clear to people. I'm not trying to invalidate out of body experiences. I'm just saying that they're different, and you have to realize that they're not the same.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I appreciate you helping make that clear to people, because I think that there's a tendency to blur some of these things together, and they're just different. So it's good to call a spade a spade.
Right. So sometimes though it's a little bit difficult, and here's the times when it's difficult, is when you find yourself aware within what appears to be a dream, but you don't remember becoming aware that you're dreaming. So you just find yourself aware. Like one time I was interacting with this Native American guy,
Mhm.
and after about 10 minutes of him explaining things to me, I go, "Wow, this is really a very stable lucid dream." And he looked at me and said, "We are not lucid dreaming." And I thought, whoa. Because I couldn't remember how I became aware. I just remember, having this high awareness as I sat across from this Native American man who was teaching me. So those are kind of the ones where I'm not exactly sure what was going on there, but anyway, it was probably one or the other.
Very interesting. Well, I have like a couple more questions if you have a few more minutes.
Yeah, anytime.
I'd love to pick your brain on. There's something you talk about in that first book about false awakenings, and I was just wondering if you could maybe help us understand what you mean by that.
Yeah, so false awakening is a term that people have developed when oftentimes they'll realize the lucid dream is coming to an end and they think they've woken up in bed and then they roll over and the lucid dream is already written in their dream journal. And how did that happen? And then they realize, oh crap, I'm still dreaming, and boom, then they wake up. So that's what you call a false awakening. You think you've awakened, but actually you're still in the dream state. Now, probably the person who explained this, the likelihood of how it happens, is Stephen LaBerge, who's kind of one of the main researchers who investigated lucid dreaming considerably and did tons of scientific research. But what he noticed is what I've noticed, that oftentimes the lucid dream reflects our beliefs and expectations. So if I believe it's going to be hard to fly through that wall, I'll bounce off the wall, even though it's made out of dream stuff, because I believe it's going to be hard to fly through. If I believe it's going to be easy to fly through, then I'll fly through it easily. But what he said is that normally false awakenings happen as you get into lucid dreaming and you begin to realize how lucid dreams come to an end. So, oh, the lucid dream is getting shaky, it's going to come to an end, and now what happens? You begin to believe and expect that you're going to wake up. And what does that do? That creates the experience of waking up, but you're still in the dream state. And you think you've woken up and you walk out into the hallway and realize, when did we get a pink carpet? And you go, crap, I'm still in a dream. So that's what a false awakening is. And I think it's all connected to expecting, believing that we're going to wake up creates an environment. And just some people in this moment, if they stop and think about it, they'll realize they're still within a lucid dream and they can go on and explore. But most of us at that time, we're just trying to wake up and keep going until we wake up.
Right. Well, thank you for explaining that. The whole concept of false awakenings and lucid dreaming in general really does remind me of movie Inception. Have you seen the Nolan movie Inception?
Right, right. So I think it's a lovely premise. Can you get information from someone else within the lucid dream state is basically what I'd say the fundamental premise is.
Yeah.
I remember my friend Ed Kellogg saying, well, he'd probably had many hundreds of lucid dreams, but had never been involved in a car chase or a gunfight. So that was the Hollywood aspect of
Sure.
lucid dreaming, because most lucid dreamers would realize, oh, those are dream bullets and dream cars, and this is all crazy
Yeah.
kind of Hollywood stuff. But yeah, it's an interesting idea to think about, and so. I think it really captivates people on one hand and kind of mystifies them on the other.
Yeah, it does. Thinking of that movie kind of reminds me of something we talked about before I hit record was give opinions generally about using technology to assist with a lucid dream. Like in the movie, they basically like take an IV and there's some machine that makes them go into like layers and layers of dreams. I mean, probably all kinds of technologies out there and will keep being technologies. But do you have like strong opinions about kind of the organic, hey, look at your hands or tap your fingers, you're falling asleep methods versus relying on an outside technology?
Right. So of course I taught myself how to lucid dream in the mid 70s, and then the scientific evidence came around in 1980. And so I was just using those early techniques that I really think are some of the best. One of which was just the power of suggestion. And so suggesting that you would become lucidly aware. And then there were other ones like seeing your hands. My dreams will see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. And so you have that kind of process. There were some other techniques that came about, some created by Stephen LaBerge. But technology is interesting because there's the technology and then there's your belief in the technology. And it's kind of like placebos.
Mm-hmm.
There's your belief in the placebo, and then there's the effect of the placebo. And so I remember my first book came out, and somebody read it, and he was just really excited. And he told me he was working on this prototype eye goggle machine. And he sent me one of the first prototypes because he wanted me to be one of the first people to try it out. So he sends me this thing, and you put on a headset, and it'll flash lights in the middle of the night and help you become aware when you see these red flashing lights. And so, there I am with the machine before sleep, trying to make sure I've got it all properly programmed and everything. And so I fall asleep with the goggles on my head. And I wake up in the middle of the night and I realize, the machine's not working at all, and I've totally messed this up. So the next night I tried again, and this time I'm going to be really focused on making the bloody thing work. And I fall asleep. I'm driving down 13th Street in a snowstorm, and all of a sudden the car in front of me spins out and goes into the ditch, and red flashing lights start to flash from the car in the snowstorm in the ditch. And I think, red flashing lights? Is this a dream? And I float out of the car and go on and have a big lucid adventure. But when I woke up, I realized that I still hadn't got the machine to work correctly. It was just my belief, my expectation to see red flashing lights that made me see red flashing lights to, create a scenario where that would occur. So that's been one of my experience that I know there's pharmaceuticals, I know there's placebos, I know there's machinery, but still the mind trumps overall. And that's how I've just come to see it. People suggest certain things, but I have yet to see a good technique, a good whatever that wasn't really just predicated on belief and expectation. And so I think as of yet, we've yet to get a technology that got beyond the placebo effect, I guess is what I'm saying.
I appreciate that response. I'm all for everybody exploring. I guess I'm like there's a little bit of a bias in my personal opinion where it's like part of the richness of the experience is like, and the growth I feel like I'm getting is I like the training your mind, almost like that's part of, I guess I view this as like a self development thing. And the fact that I can work with myself to remind myself to that I'm in a dream, like I don't know. I like feeling that I have worked towards this myself versus maybe having something that's going to quote unquote do the work for me. But I really appreciate your point too. Just priming yourself with the expectation, that could just be all there is to it with the technology.
Right.
So yeah, thank for that response.
And there's a lot of people now who talk about a particular supplement that supposedly helps people become lucidly aware. And I remember my friend Ed Kellogg, because he has a PhD in biochemistry, he decided to do his own personal scientific experiment. So he got 20 empty pill casings. In 10 of them, he put the supplement that's supposed to help you become lucidly aware. And in the other 10, I think he put something like cornstarch or flour. And so then he numbered them and he gave them to a friend. And he said, whenever I want a pill, you give me one of the pills and keep track of the number. Like on February 17th, you gave me pill number 17.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so anyway, so Ed went through the 10 pills, and darned if what he didn't discover was that he became lucidly aware more often on the placebo than he did on the supplement. And not only that, in some of the cases where he became lucidly aware, he had all of the corresponding symptoms that the supplement normally is noted for, and he had them in full bloom. And even though, once again, it was cornstarch. So again, getting past the mind is incredibly something, and that's why I really want people to realize that you're probably best off doing like you're doing, working on the mental aspects to make progress and move forward with lucid dreaming.
Well, I'm glad that you shared that as well, because it just shows, right? The mind's key to all this, and you don't need to, maybe, I wouldn't say fall prey to predatory, like, people need to make money. And if people think that they've got a path, to help people lucid dream, like, sure, I get it. But also, like, there's not just some magic technology out there that automatically does it every time for everyone.
Yeah, not at least not yet. If someone does develop it, they're going to do very well for themselves and all. But we're just not there yet. Not there
Yeah,
yet.
fair enough. Well, we're at the top of the hour. I did want to at least ask, like, what uh, two things. I want one, what's current with you? What are you working on right now? What would you like people to be aware of in terms of, like, the work you're doing, and places to stay engaged with your work? And then I have one more question after that.
Yeah. So one thing that I'm engaged with for the last 22 years is this Lucid Dreaming Experience magazine that's available for free, that my friend Lucy Gillis and I create quarterly. And we just love doing it because it gives an opportunity for people to submit their lucid dreams or submit articles to encourage others to expand their view of lucid dreaming. In fact, I've just had incredible experiences. Sometimes by reading other people's lucid dreams have helped me advance my lucid dreaming. So I always love doing that. Then I'm also recently, here in the past year or so, helped create nonprofit Lucid Dreaming Foundation. And it's called Lucid Dreaming Foundation. And what we're hoping to do is begin to raise funds so that we can advance the field of lucid dreaming. Like, maybe raise enough funds through our nonprofit to do some research studies
Yeah.
on using lucid dreaming to resolve phobias, or using lucid dreaming to resolve generalized anxiety. Because there's a lot of anecdotal reports of people using it for those things, but there's never been a scientific study. And one of the reasons is people don't give money for lucid dreaming research. A lot of the people who give out money, they've never had a lucid dream. They don't understand how powerful it can be. They don't understand the potential. So that's what we're hoping to do, and just not that area, but also other areas where we advance the field of lucid dreaming as a nonprofit, just for the good of things. But that's what I'm doing, and in my spare time, I do some workshops and things online, and keep my foot in the door that way.
Well, that I'm appreciate you bringing that up. Is there websites that we can point people to? Like, I'll link to them in the description of the YouTube video so people can find them. But what are how do we find this?
Yeah, so I think if you go to luciddreamingfoundation.org,
Okay.
it's just all one giant word, luciddreamingfoundation.org. That'll take you right to it. Or if you just Google Lucid Dreaming Foundation, then it should probably show up in the first two or three. But yeah, it's a nonprofit that we just created here in the last year or so.
Well, it seems like an absolutely worthwhile endeavor. So I will, be excited to follow along. And it's shocking to me, just thinking about, through my limited experience of how helpful this has been for me and my journey and growth and development, that there isn't more people interested in studying this scientifically in academia, and doing the ongoing research for it. It's such a vast, interesting world, and it seems like it would be something a lot of people would be excited to get, to research.
Right. And I think one of the sad things is I know a lot of the lucid dream researchers, and a lot of them tell me that there's tons of people who are interested in getting into lucid dream research, but when they go and try to get some grants to study it, there's just no funds out there, no reliable funds, other than, a neurophysiological study. Okay, we can give you $500,000 for that. You want to do a study on that? So it's really interesting. We're just not there yet. It kind of reminds me of the Beatles. So when you think about meditation over the last 80, 90 years,
Mhm.
meditation was something that monks did and people did who were really deeply religious. But then the Beatles came along and all of a sudden they were flying out to see the Maharishi, Mahesh Yogi, and they were learning transcendental meditation. And now meditation was a thing. It was on the cover of Time and all. And so I think that's what we're going to have to have. We're going to have some, Taylor Swift to have a giant lucid dream, where she heals her vocal cords or whatever. And then all of a sudden, there's 20 million Swifties out there who are begging to learn about lucid dreaming, so that they can have a better life too. But I think there's going to be some kind of watershed event like that eventually, that'll lead up to it. But like the Beatles, meditation, okay, oh, now we're studying it. There's different types of meditation. And then finally science gets involved and shows that, oh, look at all the benefits of meditation, and look at, people who are master meditators, how they have brainwave functions that are different than everybody else, and all that sort of thing. So we're not there yet, but at some point I'm sure we're gonna get there.
Well, it's cool that you are on the leading edge of this paradigm, and I hope it does take off. And I'm a huge supporter of it. As I've said multiple times now, how it's helped me. But I think that it's a really exciting, rich way to, experience the sleeping world. Something that we basically spend half our lives in there, right? So get to know your subconscious. You know, like, of course, honor normal dreams. Don't, they're nothing to poo poo. But, you've got this. It's crazy to me right now as we're seeing Apple unveil the virtual reality headsets, right? And that's the metaverse, and that's starting to become a thing. We've got access to the metaverse right now inside ourselves. It's completely free. And maybe that's why it hasn't taken off too. No one's monetized found a way to monetize this yet. Um, but it's not just exciting; it can be healing, as you pointed out in your book, and probably books. I guilty. I have not read your second book, but I will look forward to it and encourage everybody else to. Are your books? What's the best way for people to buy your books? Is it just Amazon or your website or?
Yeah, but probably the best way is just through normal booksellers and Amazon and Kindle and all that kind of stuff. And also, my books have been translated into 8 different languages. So if your preferred language is French or German or Chinese or whatever, you can give it a go that way too.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I'm excited for everybody to watch this episode. Hopefully, Taylor Swift watches and she's like, yes, I can support this, get the fan base behind it. We're going to fund all this research. And then, yeah, we'll hopefully, I mean, we can talk again in a couple of years and you can tell me how the world, you changed the world of mental health and healing through, all the studies that you put out there.
Exactly. Well, Ryan, thanks so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, Robert, thank you for being so generous with your time and thank you for your work. It's tremendous and I wish you the best and stay in touch. I'll certainly be following what's going on with the nonprofit, but until the next time, stay well and thank you.